The Hermetic Narrative of Secret Lolita by Draco Noktul. The following is an interpretation of the symbolism in a story that hits heavy with its disturbing nature and relieves this in its outcome. And although I don't really actually share the narrative, my interpretation of the narrative, the last 2 lines of that might be considered a spoiler to some, but I guess it would still surprise some in some ways if they actually read the text. In between, the lessons bounced off something that Alex Jones might have said and the confessions of Victor X can get somewhere that transcends what would be the idea if this was just some mundane entertainment. Famous of his own land, had lived through his lasting trauma as the odd-eyed one till the age of feminine fertility, binding the dam, gluing hundredfold and hundredth. As a business person, there's often the impulse to provide with or how others are not. But is the risk worth the reward? Famous of his land, the odd-eyed one thought the exchange was worth it for him and made what he could out of life. Once some morals and physical controls are bypassed, who knows what path they will fall into. Some may not leave a sign out of what you were into or what you might go along with, but a sign of what they think of you. The demon altars bear signs of their own, and you should understand them if you are dealing with them. They may be multidisciplined and ready to do exactly what you think they might. They may test your response to the possibilities of all level of depravities. Then you may be surprised by initiations into the inner wildness and meanings that may be contrary to what you choose to be before that. The worst of contraband and subversive messages will be hidden in with, are labeled as innocent and beneficial. Indifference to and participation to the vice of others may be the exposure that make a person truly perverse. It will turn out that some get nicknames like First Prince of Hell for more than some edgy cringe. Evil is not just about some deed society forbids, but a consciousness, the action to take it further beyond the limits than any crime could be as simple as to repeat a sign with the tetragrammatons. Ha Shatan, the accuser. Ha Satan, the adversary. And Shaitan, gift of Tiamat. Then a causal impressions may tell you what to do and what may become of you in your path of lust or whatever. The scene is manipulated to direct a decision. Within the strobe of options, the unspeakable taboos, the embarrassingly weird, and the restraints and deprivations in sexuality, instead of being concerned at others being mindless and soulless pleasure seekers, deal with your own tastes and controls. Are we escaping with ritual the same way that others do with drugs? The lunar gateways gives an extra dimension to the alchemy performed on a personal level, but as part of a level of community that interacts with the dark things, which takes even the mundane self by discipline to reaching into the realm of our manifesting them as your superior self. Formerly, we'd call Ga-Wa-An the devil and Litigon the hermit, but not here. Darkat's ring is a galaxy like the Fool, neither here nor there, and lust, something to master, and it draws us nearer to the realm of Maktoron, which was considered to be the Wheel of Fortune, but is now the High Priestess. I did a seasonal once, the Maban Ap Madron one about Lolita and Abzu from 2019, which touched on this theme of Lolita, Lilith, Ninlil, Lila, Ledu, Alaka, or whatever you call her, hanging from the trees with Anzu, An-Imme, Wushen, and Suk, Zwan, Anem-Dugud, Imdugud, Anzud, Asaku, or whatever you call them. Famous of his land, didn't know the techniques to produce adrenochrome by a calm transmutation of the hard work, stress, and pain in life without committing atrocities. So he was willing to aid and abet to gain access to his prize. Most would call Nithra the star, but we will call her death. The spell of dissatisfaction with himself and regressive desires was cast. Say the Luzbuma chant of Lilith. Eve Merks Erzaz Zaztav Ororgas Orizx. Mercury has a poisonous relationship or item or feature with feet of honey and 100,000 covenants of fire. After being as Karu Samsu, the lovers, formerly known as Death, she had presented herself as the evening while hinting at the death and mourning in the sign that reminded him of the satanic points as she disappeared into the offering lit before him. 1. Respect not pity or weakness, for they are a disease that makes the sick the strong. 2. Test always your strength, for therein lies success. 3. Seek happiness in victory, but never in peace. 4. Enjoy a short rest, better than a long. 5. Come as a reaper, for thus will you sow. 6. Never love anything so much you cannot see it die. 7. Build not upon sand, but upon rock, and build not for today, are yesterday, but for all time. 8. Strive ever for more. For conquest is never done. 9. And die rather than submit. 10. Forge not works of art, but swords of death, for therein lies great art. 11. Learn to raise yourself above yourself, so you can triumph over all. 12. The blood of the living makes good fertilizer for the seeds of the new. 13. He who stands atop the highest pyramid of skulls can see the furthest. 14. Discard not love, but treat it as an impostor, but ever be just. 15. All that is great is built upon sorrow. 16. Strive not only forwards, but upwards, for greatness lies in the highest. 17. Come as a fresh, strong wind that breaks, yet also creates. 18. Let love of life be a goal, but let your highest goal be greatness. 19. Nothing is beautiful except man, but most beautiful of all is woman. 20. Reject all illusion and lies, for they hinder the strong. 21. What does not kill makes stronger. The guard had taught him the way to the sonic realms. It gets a bit William Guy Carr to Alex Jonesy at this point, but know that it was to prepare the consciousness for shall drawn out of the pit, or to whom about just Abaddon are Tzwa Root Tuchit. Par Mushet Cheat are Mush Cheat. Beef Hiyun climbing are Bor Shao. Shari Moot Keeper of Death. Lasha are Tazulmut. And Arts Techteat are Dia Ben Hanam. Intelligence. Are whatever you call the hell realms of the hereafter. Shallow identity, drugs, lust, violence, uncleanliness, disregard, and idolatry infested famous of his land with their spiritual forces. When traumas like violence that made famous in his own land, the odd-eyed one are not direct, and they are instead directed in an uncontrolled spirituality. Their brutalization can lead them towards sacramentalizing what traumatizes them further. When others direct you by drugs and music, who knows what they are setting you up for? Not knowing what was real anymore, famous of his land knew what exposure opened him to what led him from acceptance to participation in the most perverted and criminal aspects of life, and took his rage out there. flanked by the signs of those that were over deeds like his. The dark mothers had taken away his sense of humanity. The age of the hundredfold binding and feminine fertility was past, and he was ready to make his dying a ritual. It was like Easter in Darkat's ring, and the evening was there to greet the odd-eyed one with a sacramental food of Pisces, Aries, and Taurus. Famous of his land, was taken to a company of earth elementals who had the Temple of Blood seal on their black vests. His thoughts hinted satanic front. Anointed and dressed in white, he completed the deal he was sent on by the guard. It was then that whom they served were known and fed. The devouring mother, Angazboda, she knew of her son, and her 3 children with Loki. Jormungandr, huge monster. Fenrir, the Herodvitnir, and Hell, a gloomy being that takes part of the dead. Famous in his own land, resisted their use of him as a wand to mirror by his centers the victimization he aided and abetted. Famous of his land, thought he was getting married. As they sung the Diabolos. The day of wrath, that day will dissolve the world in ashes. Satan and the oracle being witnesses, how great will be the shaking when the victor descends, whose investigation is of all. Open the skies and bring forth increasing universal remedy, and the sickle bearing day of wrath, that day. Famous of his land, thought that he had to consummate his marriage. through the evening in his age of gathering, dissolution, faint-heartedness, softness, and foot. But it was not to last, and his misgivings began to be exposed. The guard connected with her by a poem of her as the star, but unveils her little in nature as the fool, death, the hermit, and strength. Kept from further pursuit of his desires by a wound like the silver rune on blue that he saw earlier. The evening connected to the magician, formerly called the Hanged Man and the Fool. Banan Ak and Gawath Am manifested, and he was the invoking wand for the evening. After a sacramental drink, she was no longer cute, but a Gamari, that par-like being who showed him of a causal reality. He was not escaping, with illusion and delusion lifted. No amount of revulsion could stop the afterlife he knew he deserved as their pig for the slaughter. It was himself he gave up as he tried to gather himself within the spell of the evening. He had fed by the ways of his perception for Darkat, and was in the deathless death as a Lovecraftian gelatinous monster, disturbing under the world and the universe. Now, I think now I can throw in the every 17. So if there's in one of these stories a 17-year-old or 17 years past, that's one aspect of it. And 21, but really 22, because Alastros and the path to the earth or the path to beyond or whatever. So also, so either 21-year-old at 22 or 42-year-old at 43, 42-year-old at 43 is the right of recalling that we're getting into here. Of course, looking at the numbers like 21, 22, 30, that sort of thing, we are talking about the paths. And 17, in many spiritual paths, we are talking about the night and day cycle. So through the night and day cycle of ritual, you involve yourself somehow in all the stations. And 42 to 43 can be considered a way of thinking about the states, but I've talked about the number value of this here